Chapter 1 Midnight Arrival Sergeant First Class Thomas Red shuffled through the dimly lit cabin of his solitary retreat on the edge of a desolate frontier colony, adjusting to the oppressive stillness that surrounded him. His weathered face bore silent testimony to years of harsh service and countless battles fought far from this isolated world. The old scars crisscrossing his hands told tales of bravery and regret as he reached for an ancient rifle resting beside his bed. Outside, a cold wind howled against the wooden cabin, carrying with it the distant cries of predators hunting their prey in the dark wilderness beyond. Thomas had long since grown accustomed to these nightly symphonies of nature's violence, but tonight felt different and naturally tense and foreboding. His sixth sense tingling, he grabbed his nightshirt off a nearby chair and pulled it on over his naked torso, padding barefoot across the wooden floorboards that creaked under his weight. He made his way to the small window beside his door, peering out into the pitch-black expanse of the forest. The only illumination came from the faint shimmering of stars above, their light barely penetrating the thick canopy below. Thomas sighed heavily and stepped back from the window, reaching for a flashlight on the countertop as he moved towards the front door. With one hand gripping his old rifle tightly and another holding the flashlight, Thomas cautiously turned the handle and pushed open the cabin's main entrance. The cold night air rushed in around him like an icy claw, threatening to freeze the breath stilling in his throat. He switched on the flashlight and swept it across the porch, revealing a shadowy figure curled up against one side of the door. A woman no more than 5 feet 10 inches tall, but with an undeniable grace despite her state of exhaustion, lay huddled there. Her silver blue skin shone faintly in the dim light from his cabin's interior as she stirred slightly at the sound of Thomas opening the door, lifting emerald green eyes filled with a mix of terror and hope towards him. "May I stay tonight, human? Please." Her voice was soft but urgent amidst the howling wind. "They are coming." Thomas stood rooted to the spot for only an instant before his training took over, instincts guiding him through every step that followed. He did not hesitate in pulling back from the door and stepping aside. "Get inside," he commanded quietly yet firmly. The woman scrambled quickly to her feet, eyes never leaving Thomas as she stumbled into the cabin behind him with a soft thud of bare skin against wood floorboards. Without further delay or thought for propriety, she closed herself within the safety of his home and leaned heavily against its locked door once more. Thomas clicked off the flashlight's beam, moving swiftly to place it aside on a shelf near where he could easily retrieve it if needed. He reloaded himself with ammunition from an old ammo belt hanging over the wall beside him before securing his rifle properly in hand again. All this time, his gaze never left that door, searching for any hint of movement beyond. "How many?" His voice was low and controlled despite everything he knew about what might be out there waiting for them both. The woman straightened up slowly, her breath coming faster now as she answered him with a whisper. 6, maybe more." Thomas let the silence settle between them before nodding sharply to himself, turning away from the door towards his cabin's small but well-equipped living room area, where he could start formulating their next course of action against whatever threats lurked outside in the darkness. The air inside Thomas' home was thick with tension and cold sweat. The sound of his own breathing echoed faintly off wooden walls, each breath carrying more weight than it had a moment ago when this stranger first stumbled onto his porch. Cold steel against leather straps and fabric whispers brushing past him as he paced restlessly. Princess Liara Vexthane stood just inside the cabin door now. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest, threatening to burst through her ribcage with every beat. Her gaze flickered nervously from corner to corner of this space, that was suddenly both sanctuary and battlefield under one roof. Each surface seemed alien yet oddly familiar. Everything here told stories of struggle and survival of a man who had fought hard just to live, but never stopped fighting for others. "Who are you?" she asked softly, her voice barely above the whispering wind outside. "And why do I sense such strength in you?" Thomas paused his pacing and faced her directly, then, eyeing her carefully with eyes as deep and darkly unreadable as night itself. "Sergeant First Class Thomas Red," he answered simply enough. "Why are they after you?" He knew it was too late to be silent now. She needed answers, and perhaps so did he. Liara's shoulders tensed slightly, though she managed not to flinch away from the cold hardness of his gaze. "My people, my Emily." A shiver ran through her frame despite herself as thoughts of slaughtered kin and lost titles danced around in her mind. Yet there was no time for mourning here tonight. They had enemies pressing against them, like shadowy predators closing ranks. "They killed my father, tried to claim me. He alive," she explained tersely. After a long moment passed between them. "They want me dead or broken, preferably both." "Who?" Thomas pressed further into their current dilemma. Her eyes darkened with renewed determination as she faced him squarely once more. "Assassins from another planet on order sent by my uncle's faction to eliminate any rivals left alive after his coup." Thomas grunted softly, understanding dawning on that war-worn face of his. She was royalty, then some sort of princess, or maybe even queen-to-be who'd escaped the massacre back home. "You're scared," he noted calmly instead, though clearly recognizing it as nothing new under this moonlit sky. "But I saw something in you before too, same kind of courage we both carry." Liara nodded slowly, swallowing hard against a knot forming tightly within her throat. "I am. Not anymore." Her voice held no tremors now, but firm resolve wrapped around every word spoken. They needed to act fast. They knew that much already. But who would strike next? How prepared were they really for what awaited them? Thomas turned back towards his living room area, setting down the rifle beside a small table cluttered with old battle maps and tools of survival skills honed over decades spent in service. "Come here," he instructed her, finally moving to stand by an open doorway leading deeper into house. Liara followed him carefully, across creaking floorboards, until they came face to face once more amidst piles of supplies neatly arranged for quick retrieval under pressure situations such as theirs tonight. A sense of camaraderie began forming between them despite their sudden pairing. She recognized in this grizzled veteran a kindred spirit forged from the crucible of war. "We can fortify ourselves here," Thomas said firmly. "I'll take point outside if needed. I'll stay back inside ready to defend." His tone left no room for argument. "Agreed," Liara responded quietly, matching his resolve with her own brand of strength learned through necessity. "But I won't be cowering in fear while you protect me." Thomas gave a small nod, acknowledging both the danger posed and her bravery. "Good. Let's make it so these assassins never reach us." His gaze hardened once more as he prepared to face whatever horrors awaited them tonight under cover of darkness. Hours blurred together into what felt like an eternity spent on edge, each second stretching out longer than those before. Thomas watched through carefully placed windows and peepholes, scanning the perimeter for signs of movement, while Liara scoured every inch within their makeshift defenses, building up layers upon layers against intrusion from outside forces pressing ever closer. The night wore on heavy with suspense, until finally breaking at last into dawn's soft blush across darkened skies. But neither man nor alien could afford any respite, continuing vigilance as first light trickled through trees and painted shadows dancing along cabin walls. Thomas hadn't killed anyone in years. He'd sworn off violence long ago, when he retired from active duty to find peace amidst solitude here on this distant colony world, far away from battles fought elsewhere. Yet tonight might change all that, forcing him back into a role he thought laid permanently behind him once more as protectors against those who sought death for her. And yet there remained an unspoken connection growing between them, born out of shared desperation and mutual respect, forged under circumstances neither could have foreseen nor planned. Tonight marked just the beginning of what would surely become many more challenges ahead, but also offered glimpses of hope that even amidst despair, heroes rose to answer calls when needed most. Tonight might change things, Thomas murmured softly as he turned back inside from his post at a window overlooking approaching daylight. Liara's eyes met his across the room, where she stood silently watching over supplies and plans laid out before them. It will have to. Thus ended their quiet but intense confrontation with fate at midnight arrival, beginning what would become much more than either of them anticipated in days, weeks ahead. Liara watched as Thomas moved methodically through his preparations for what was to come, her heart a tumultuous mix of fear and awe at this rugged man who had taken up arms on her behalf. The cabin's walls were lined with the tools of survival, skills honed over decades spent in service. "Come here," he instructed her, finally moving to stand by an open doorway leading deeper into house. Liara followed him carefully, across creaking floorboards, until they came face to face once more amidst piles of supplies neatly arranged for quick retrieval under pressure situations. "CH is theirs tonight." A sense of camaraderie began forming between them despite their sudden pairing. She recognized in this grizzled veteran a kindred spirit forged from the crucible of war. "First things first," Thomas said, his voice steady but laced with urgency. "We need to bandage your wounds and make sure they are clean." She nodded silently, eyes tracing over his weathered features, a face marked by years of battles fought and won or lost. There was a quiet strength about him that commanded respect without ever needing to speak. "We can fortify ourselves here," Thomas said firmly, gesturing towards various barricades already in place around the cabin's small living area. "It'll take point outside if needed. You'll stay back inside ready to defend." His tone left no room for argument. "Agreed," Liara responded quietly, matching his resolve with her own brand of strength, learned through necessity. "But I won't be cowering in fear while you protect me." Thomas gave a small nod, acknowledging both the danger posed and her bravery. "Good. Let's make it so these assassins never reach us." His gaze hardened once more as he prepared to face whatever horrors awaited them tonight under cover of darkness. The night wore on heavy with suspense, until finally breaking at last into dawn's soft blush across darkened skies. But neither man nor alien could afford any respite, continuing vigilance as first light trickled through trees and painted shadows dancing along cabin walls. Liara, her eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep, but filled with determination, watched Thomas move around the small space, gathering additional supplies for their potential defense. She knew she had to do something more than just wait. There was a purpose inside her that refused to allow this momentary safety to lull them into complacency. "Thomas," Liara spoke up suddenly, her voice breaking through the tense silence of the early morning light filtering in through cracks around windows and gaps between door panels. "We need to be prepared for more than just those who will come at dawn." He turned towards her with a grim nod. "Right now we focus on staying alive until then," he replied quietly, though his eyes showed understanding and respect for the broader concern. "Do you trust me?" Liara asked hesitantly, but firmly, meeting Thomas' gaze head on despite knowing there was no easy way to navigate this question without some measure of vulnerability. I know we have very little time. Thomas paused in his movements, considering her words carefully before speaking again with measured deliberation. You've proven yourself resourceful and brave enough times over already. She swallowed hard against the tightness rising within her throat. Had not asked for this man's trust out of bravado, but necessity. Then let me help, she continued firmly, taking a step towards him. I can prepare defenses too. Thomas looked at her steadily before finally nodding once more in agreement. All right then, let's fortify ourselves further. Inside the cabin, they worked side by side, moving swiftly yet meticulously, as if choreographed dancers performing an intricate ballet of survival techniques honed from years of practice and bloodshed across countless fronts. Here, Thomas said after a moment's pause, while taping up loose panels around another window facing eastward toward rising sun. Keep these ready. Liara nodded, taking charge over securing additional layers against potential intrusion, reinforcing barricades with whatever materials were at hand within the modest confines of this frontier home. Outside near the perimeter, Thomas moved silently through shadowy passages between trees, scanning every corner for signs of approaching danger or lurking threats beyond immediate sight. Each breath he took came out in icy puffs, visible even amidst chill morning air. His rifle steady and alert alongside him, always ready to take aim at any emerging target. As first light truly broke across the sky, painting everything with hues ranging from soft pinkish oranges to deeper blues lingering around horizon, Thomas re-entered cabin interior. After completing his patrol, he moved directly towards Liara, standing watch near central doorway, observing their surroundings intently as well. Any sign? She asked immediately upon seeing him approach. No movement yet, he replied curtly, but without false reassurance, knowing such peace would surely last only so long given what was to come soon enough. I've patched your wounds for now. Cleaned them up to nothing serious, though not to underestimate these assassins' ability or intent either way. Stay ready. Liara nodded in acknowledgement, stepping away from doorway slightly and moving closer towards where medical supplies were laid out on table nearby instead. As she began to tend to any lingering discomfort caused by injuries inflicted during flight, Thomas stood guard, watching over her actions closely. You're brave, he said quietly, after a moment, breaking silence between them with observation rather than question voice, low, as if knowing too much volume could bring unwelcome attention towards their secluded haven before time was ripe for such intrusion. Indeed came closer, every passing second now counting down. Thank you. Liara's voice trembled slightly despite effort to remain composed. And, Thomas? Yes, he asked carefully, turning his head back over shoulder, without leaving guard position at door entirely just yet, so as not distract from critical defense setup still ongoing around them both. You might be the first person in a long time who hasn't seen me. Only for what I am, princess worth killing for profit. The weight of her words hung heavy between them, unspoken but clear. She was far more than that to him now too, perhaps, even if such sentiment remained largely implicit within context of shared struggle against common enemy. Just stay focused, he replied after a brief hesitation where emotions almost threatened through. On what's important here? She understood his response wasn't dismissal necessarily, just pragmatic necessity given circumstances surrounding them, but appreciated effort towards maintaining that balance nonetheless. Suddenly, there came an ominous creaking noise from outside, a sound of something shifting in the underbrush close by and growing nearer with each passing second. Stay back, Thomas commanded sharply, without breaking eye contact, now turned fully toward doorway again, while reaching for rifle prepared for immediate use, if needed against intruders approaching far too soon indeed, according to calculations made earlier tonight during planning phase, when darkness yet concealed both their location from prying eyes seeking out this one last remaining princess left alive amidst fallen royal bloodline. Liara watched him closely, her heart racing as Thomas moved towards the entrance, prepared for whatever might come next. She could see his hand tighten around the rifle, a silent promise of protection and determination to keep any harm away from them both, no matter what it took. "Thomas," she whispered urgently, her voice barely audible over the growing tension in the air, now crackling with potential for violence erupting at any moment. "Yes," he answered, without turning fully back towards her, but instead leaving eye contact just enough to acknowledge her presence, still even amidst imminent danger pressing ever closer around them like shadowy tendrils reaching outwards from darkness itself, seeking vulnerable prey within reach once more after long nights spent merely waiting for exact moment when fate would intervene decisively. "Can you fight?" she asked, the question hanging heavy between them, despite knowing full well what answer awaited based on scars adorning every inch of his body, telling tales far beyond words ever could alone convey, such depth and experience born from countless battles, fought indeed over years past, now converging once more here in this small cabin, besieged against all odds by assassins seeking ultimate prize hidden amongst their midst. He paused briefly, the question hanging heavily between them for a moment, before he answered succinctly yet powerfully, enough to leave no room for further doubt or need questioning beyond what had already been said through actions and deeds spanning decades long, now finally culminating here at dawn's break amidst perilous situation converging around them both, without warning nor invitation extended by either party involved directly. "Yea," Thomas replied simply, eyes narrowing slightly as he continued moving towards door, ready to meet any challenge head on yet again, even after years away from such conflicts, once more rising up within these walls, now surrounded against all odds, yet still standing defiantly together amidst growing threat converging ever closer around them both, without mercy or hesitation shown forth by unseen forces pressing inwards relentlessly from every direction simultaneously. And then there came another sound, a faint whisper of something moving just outside their sanctuary, footsteps, muffled voices perhaps, the unmistakable signs that dawn's light had attracted exactly what they feared most. But within those walls now stood a warrior and a survivor, ready to face whatever lay ahead, toge their own final stand against all odds, despite looming shadows threatening to engulf them completely once more, without hope of escape or reprieve offered anywhere amidst such desperate circumstances unfolding rapidly around them both. "Here they come," Thomas murmured softly as he turned back inside from his post at window overlooking approaching daylight, rifle steady and ready, even before any clear threat yet visible beyond immediate confines within which they now found themselves, utterly besieged by unseen hands reaching forth once more to claim ultimate prize left amidst ashes of fallen royal lineage. Liara's eyes met his across room, where she stood silently watching over supplies prepared earlier for such potential defensive variance lie. He out meticulously, according plan honed throughout long nights spent anticipating exact moment when fate would intervene decisively, thus bringing them both face to face once more against shared enemy threatening not just lives but entire existence, left amidst ruins now surrounding them both, without mercy shown forth by unseen forces pressing ever closer despite efforts made towards repelling intrusion outright. Tonight might change things, Thomas murmured softly as he turned back inside from his post at a window overlooking approaching daylight. Liara's eyes met his across the room, where she stood silently watching over supplies and plans laid out before them. It will have to. Thomas Reed's hand tightened around his rifle as he watched through a crack in the wooden cabin door. The morning light was still pale and subdued, casting long shadows from the trees that surrounded their small sanctuary. 6 figures emerged from the forest, first rays of sunlight catching on the cold metal of their weapons. "Human," one shouted, voice crisp and clear over the quiet dawn air. "Send out the princess. No need for you to die." Thomas' grip tightened further as he looked back at Liara. She was standing in the corner of his small room, her silver blue skin gleaming faintly in the dim light that filtered through tattered curtains. Her clothes were torn and dirty from days on the run, but there was a fierce determination etched into every line of her face. "No need for you to die," Thomas repeated quietly, more to himself than anyone else. "Yeah, right." Liara's eyes met his over the room, unspoken words passing between them. She could see in him what he tried so hard not to show, a man who had lived and fought through far worse, but still protected those weaker or less fortunate. There was a glint of something raw and old in her gaze now, an acknowledgement that this fight wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about dignity. "Please," she whispered, though the word held no plea for mercy. It was more like a recognition, a nod to what he already knew needed doing here. "Stay if you can." Thomas took a deep breath and exhaled slowly before turning fully back towards Liara with an expression that spoke of old resolve rather than hope. "I'll be right back," he said firmly, his voice echoing slightly in the small space as he moved past her to open the door cautiously, stepping out into the cool morning air. The assassins were now standing just outside the clearing around their cabin, weapons drawn and eyes sharp with anticipation. "Not here," Thomas called confidently, though there was no chance of them believing him at this point. "Then you die for nothing," one responded coldly from among them, a tall figure dressed in black armor that reflected morning light like polished steel. The others stood silently behind him, each weapon held steady and aimed directly towards the cabin door, where Thomas now stood alone as sentinel against their advance into his home turf. "I wouldn't be the first time," Thomas countered with something close to bitter familiarity, lowering himself into a defensive stance despite knowing full well that he was already outmatched here in every way imaginable except one. Refused to let these people take Liara away unchallenged, no matter how slim their chances may actually prove themselves when facing such overwhelming odds. He raised his rifle then, taking careful aim at the lead figure before him. His fingers tightened around the trigger, but hesitated there, a split-second delay where everything could still turn on one wrong move either way. The tension between them was palpable, a thickening of air that seemed to carry all their fears and uncertainties alike right down onto this single, frozen moment poised at edge, separating life from death once more for both him and Liara inside. Just as Thomas Reed's mind made up its final decision, however, whether or not he could truly go through with whatever was about to unfold here, it suddenly struck him forcibly that perhaps there wasn't going to be any choice left open after all. The assassins were already starting forward, moving towards them at last despite his defiance and warning. "Stay in the cabin," Thomas shouted back sharply over their closing distance, even as he readied himself for what would follow next, no matter who else might end up caught within its fallout or consequences beyond just this immediate struggle itself. Liara's eyes narrowed with fierce resolve then, though she nodded once briefly before stepping away from door and finding cover near supplies laid out earlier. Her movements were quick, but measured, trained by royal upbringing, yet tempered now through countless days spent fighting for survival amongst harsh realities, very different indeed than those familiar to anyone who had known luxury or comfort previously. "Ready," Liara called back tersely then as Thomas stepped fully outside into early morning light, closing door behind him with an almost silent click that nonetheless seemed loudly final amidst growing silence all around them. Instead, every muscle in his body tensed up further now under weight of responsibility placed squarely onto shoulders yet again, despite how much he would have given to simply walk away from it once more after years supposedly long past such burdens. Thomas Red met eyes with one last assassin standing directly ahead before him, Somion, who had never truly understood just what it meant to fight for something or someone other than oneself entirely. For these were not soldiers like Thomas, merely cold-blooded killers whose job was simply to eliminate targets according contracts regardless of any personal moral compass guiding their actions. "Sorry," he whispered almost gently then, more as an apology perhaps towards everything left behind rather than anyone facing him down now. Before they could react fully, however, for the lead figure raised rifle again to fire upon him in earnest, pulled trigger himself, instead aiming at center mass, where vital organs lay beneath protective armor plating. The impact was sharp and sudden, a momentary explosion of sound cutting through dawn's quiet air like thunderclap amidst stillness. Thomas felt his own body jolt back slightly from recoil, but held ground firmly, otherwise already assessing damage done, even as more shots began raining down upon cabin itself now that opening act had begun in earnest. "Cover me," he shouted towards Liara, who responded instantly with a burst of fire aimed directly at nearest attackers, forcing them to scatter for cover momentarily until next round could commence anew. Though they faced overwhelming odds, indeed, it was clear early on both from look and feel alike that Thomas Reid would not go down easily, nor would Princess Liara Vexthane allow herself be taken so readily once more after having fought so hard simply to survive this far. "Inside," he shouted again sharply now as bullets began whizzing past closer still towards them, forcing each into defensive mode instead. Yet despite best efforts, there was little chance of holding these people off indefinitely in such close confines, certainly not without significant risk posed towards anyone left trapped inside here amidst crossfire, thus rapidly escalating beyond initial standoff already established. Liara's movements were swift and precise as she began moving across floorboards carefully, aiming shots directly at assailants closest to entry points, while Thomas kept up covering fire from his position outside door, now cracked open just enough for him yet far too small for them. Every shot counted, however. Every wasted bullet only brought others closer still who had no intention of leaving this place intact or its occupants safe once mission declared complete here. "Hurry," he urged one last time then, voice strained with effort and adrenaline alike, as bullets continued pinging off wooden frame near both heads, no, forcing each to huddle close against walls, instead, for brief moments respite from relentless assault unleashed upon them, without mercy shown forth by unseen forces pressing ever closer despite efforts made towards repelling intrusion outright. And still they fought back fiercely, even when odds seemed stacked impossibly high in favor of their attackers, refusing merely to be taken so readily. After days spent on run already evading capture until now. Thomas' rifle clicked dry, then but he ignored it momentarily, focusing instead entirely upon making sure Liara reached safety first before facing fate himself once more amidst this final stand against all odds. Despite looming shadows threatening completely engulf them both, without hope of escape or reprieve offered anywhere midst desperate circumstances unfolding rapidly around them. "Now!" he shouted sharply one last time as bullets finally started piercing walls, now forcing each into tight corner together, where they could no longer hold attackers off indefinitely, nor even see what next awaited beyond immediate confines, thus left utterly besieged by unseen hands reaching forth once more to claim ultimate prize amidst ashes of fallen royal lineage and long-lost battles fought far too many years ago for any new ones ever truly won here against such relentless onslaught pressing inwards relentlessly from every direction simultaneously. He raised his rifle then, hand tightening around trigger even as another round impacted nearby, sending splinters flying everywhere, his eyes narrowing sharply towards nearest assassin, who now stood within striking distance. Finally, the moment hung heavy between them both, one final decision poised right at edge, separating life and death alike once more amidst this struggle for survival against all odds. Despite looming shadows threatening completely engulf them both, without hope of escape or reprieve offered anywhere midst desperate circumstances unfolding rapidly around them. And then he pulled trigger again, sound echoing sharply across clearing as dawn finally broke fully into an day, bringing no respite from conflict yet faced, but rather final reckoning drawn at last amidst ashes of fallen royal lineage and long-lost battles fought far too many years ago for any new ones ever truly won here against such relentless onslaught pressing inwards relentlessly from every direction simultaneously. And he raises his rifle. Thomas Red slammed his rifle back into place once it was empty and gritted his teeth as he listened intently for movement outside. The cabin had become a fortress of sorts, every window boarded up tight against the relentless storm of gunfire from unseen assailants who were closing in steadily despite their best efforts to hold them off. "Liara," Thomas called out, voice low but urgent, "get ready to go." Princess Liara Vexthane emerged silently from behind a large bookshelf that had been hastily propped against the door. Her silver-blue skin glistened faintly in the pale light of dawn creeping through gaps around window shutters, her eyes wide with fear yet determined. "Where are we going?" she asked quietly, moving to Thomas' side as he began stacking supplies into a makeshift pack. "We need to move out," Thomas replied tersely. "The cabin isn't safe anymore." Liara nodded sharply and grabbed some essentials from the shelves around them: water bottles, dried food rations, emergency medical kit, and stuffed these items quickly but efficiently inside their shared bag. Her hands moved with an unshakable precision that spoke volumes about her royal training despite being a refugee on this distant planet. "Let's go," Thomas said finally, after securing everything necessary for immediate survival into their pack and checking his own supplies. "Follow me." They slipped out through the back door of Thomas's cabin, which was less obstructed by debris than the front. The cold morning air bit at them as they stepped outside onto a narrow path leading deeper into the forest, the landscape bathed in an eerie half-light where trees loomed tall and shadows seemed to whisper secrets only known within their ancient gnarled branches. Thomas led the way confidently, drawing upon years of experience navigating these woods even when night had fallen. Each step crunched softly beneath his boots, while Liara followed closely behind, her breath visible in icy trails as she struggled slightly with terrain that was unfamiliar yet hostile to outsiders like herself. Their progress through thick undergrowth and across rocky streams brought them into denser parts of the forest where sunlight barely pierced high above, casting everything below in stark contrast between light patches and deeper shades of greenery. "Stay close," Thomas warned, when they encountered an especially steep incline covered densely by fallen leaves and twisted roots. "This is dangerous." Liara nodded again, but didn't falter. Instead, she pressed forward alongside him, as if determined to prove her resilience against whatever challenges lay ahead, whether man or beast. The pair continued deeper into the wilderness until Thomas abruptly halted at what appeared initially like just another cluster of trees blocking their path. "I hear them," he whispered darkly, dropping down low and pulling Liara with him behind a large fallen tree trunk as silent whispers began echoing ominously through underbrush nearby. Sure enough, figures soon emerged from between trunks, shadowy shapes that moved cautiously but steadily towards the direction Thomas had been leading. He counted heads. There were 2 now advancing their way after them, making it 4 total minus himself and Liara remaining hidden here amidst brush. "Stay," he murmured to her, before slinking forward silently through tangle of roots toward where voices grew louder, yet muffled slightly by leaves still crunching beneath, feet pressing deeper into forest heart. Thomas paused briefly behind cover offered by a thick bush near center of trail, then leapt out swiftly, aiming accurately at both targets who hadn't spotted him coming, and fired. The report from his silenced weapon was barely audible beyond nearby rustling wind, but effects were deadly precise, as intended. 2 assassins crumpled suddenly without sound. Thomas checked quickly for signs they might yet be alive before moving on again, aware he couldn't linger long with more surely close behind, now alerted by sudden quietude breaking earlier relentless assault upon cabin. He turned back slightly toward Liara, once certain immediate threat dispatched, and beckoned her forward silently, eyes scanning ahead warily while keeping pace brisker still as urgency mounted for each passing moment without safe haven remaining nearby. This section of forest opened gradually outwards into broader area filled with taller stands of coniferous trees, ground here more open yet rough terrain covered in fallen logs and dense patches undergrowth. "Here," Thomas said finally, after spotting advantageous position amongst largest tree trunks encircled tightly by smaller ones forming a natural barricade against approach from all directions save directly ahead through opening between branches. He gestured for Liara to take up covering fire while he moved swiftly outward into open space where next set of pursuers would likely emerge, stealthy yet calculated steps guided by instinct honed over decades hunting threats just like these. His movements were swift but methodical, every step carefully chosen as he ventured further outwards toward anticipated location. Sunlight was growing brighter now, filtering down through canopy high above, casting shadows sharply across ground below. Thomas squinted against glare, while keeping keen senses attuned for slightest sign of movement ahead, which would betray next assault's origin. Sure enough, voices grew louder again from direction previously unexplored as 2 more figures began moving slowly yet resolutely toward him, weapons drawn and ready. This time, however, they had no place to retreat into darkness immediately. Thomas instead met them head on, choosing strategic vantage point among fallen logs where cover remained sufficient while offering clear sight lines outward. "Liara," he called sharply back towards their hideout, now situated safely out of direct line of fire from these advancing enemies, ready for more. She nodded almost imperceptibly, even as she took position behind larger tree trunk readying her own weapon, a makeshift staff wrapped partially in wire and sharpened stones at both ends. Thomas watched approvingly. Her resourcefulness was commendable considering how little time they had together to learn from one another's skills. "On my mark," he whispered into Calm's device secured tightly against his ear as confirmation of signal, before turning attention fully back towards approaching assailants who by now were closing rapidly inward toward prearranged battleground. Now, with practiced precision and deadly aim, Thomas opened fire. First single shot followed quickly by second, aimed directly at center mass, where each target's armor was weakest, amidst exposed necks and joints visible between protective plates. His accuracy paid off, as both attackers staggered briefly under impact, yet continued advancing despite clear injuries sustained from initial encounter. Seeing opportunity present itself for counterstrike, Liara surged forward, moving swiftly along ground level, taking advantage of lower profile presented to foes still partially out in open where she could see better, while remaining hidden long enough. She swung her makeshift weapon decisively, striking first one then another attacker hard across skull, causing them both to crumple immediately, incapacitated. "Good work," Thomas praised briefly over Calm's link as he moved quickly back toward their hideout, now with only 2 enemies left who were surely more difficult to face, but also likely more wary and capable fighters. "Get ready again, we need cover." Liara nodded sharply once more, before slipping swiftly through underbrush towards sheltered spot between tree trunks, offering both camouflage and vantage for next round of confrontation. Her movements fluent yet cautious, as if fully anticipating what awaited them. Thomas joined her silently moments later, assessing situation carefully now that remaining attackers had circled inward from opposite direction, pressing inwards ever more closely despite increasing resistance. This leader among their pursuers was undoubtedly Special Forces caliber, trained specifically to track down and eliminate threats, exactly like Thomas himself once upon a time before choosing quieter life isolated away. "Here," he said finally, pointing toward locations slightly elevated, yet still protected somewhat by foliage, where they could potentially regroup while awaiting final assault. This place seemed strategically beneficial given current circumstances. "Let's set up." They moved swiftly into position, Liara taking point on one side while Thomas covered another angle from which likely attack would come, both of them now prepared mentally and physically for last confrontation amidst this relentless chase. "Almost there," he murmured quietly, as they readied themselves once more against encroaching darkness that seemed to close around Forest Heart, where remaining assassins surely must soon appear. "Stay sharp." Liara nodded, taking deep breaths to center herself despite rising tension palpable in air between them, now each aware of stakes involved and dangers approaching ever nearer, with no escape route left open save perhaps victory here amidst thickening shadows. And then he saw its shadow moving swiftly through trees toward final clearing where they stood waiting. Thomas raised his rifle once more, hand tightening around trigger as dawn broke fully into new day, casting stark contrasts across forest floor below. "Now, Andy," he raises his rifle. Thomas raised his rifle as he saw movement through the trees, a shadow creeping toward their position from behind cover of dense underbrush and thick canopy. Dawn filtered through branches, casting long, pale fingers across forest floor where Liara stood vigilant beside him. "Now," Thomas whispered sternly into Calm's link, with a final tightening around trigger guard before firing 2 precise shots aimed directly at emerging figure who staggered backward momentarily but quickly regained footing despite clear injury evident from impact sustained. Second attacker moved in immediately after Thiz, one younger, faster, more agile than predecessors by far. He's different, Yara noted tersely over radio, as remaining assassin closed distance rapidly now that his companion had fallen back incapacitated yet still posed significant threat due to superior combat skills honed through rigorous training regimen evident throughout every fluid motion made toward their encampment. More like you. Thomas nodded grimly, even though she couldn't see him, eyes narrowing sharply under brim of weather-beaten hat as he assessed this final foe now closing rapidly on position-trained senses, picking up subtle shifts in air pressure indicating lethal intent carried by blade at ready and pistol holstered low along thigh. This wasn't an ordinary soldier. It was someone who had faced similar situations countless times before. He's the leader, Thomas explained quietly yet firmly, gesturing to Liara silently with hand, signaling for her to take defensive position on left flank while he moved to intercept head-on approach of advancing enemy. We handle him together. Liara nodded sharply, an understanding moving swiftly into designated role, while Thomas readied himself at center line facing down incoming threat directly. Both combatants acutely aware that this encounter would determine outcome not just for them, but also entire fate hanging precariously on edge amidst dwindling options available within confines of forest clearing. Last chance, Thomas called out loudly yet clearly toward approaching figure, who paused briefly mid-stride staring coldly back at him from behind protective cover of foliage. Walk away and live. The assassin laughed harshly, without humor, eyes flashing dangerously beneath shadowed cowl concealing identities. Was no ordinary mercenary seeking quick profit or glory in death. Instead it seemed more akin to twisted zealot pursuing vendetta against royal line now reduced merely to last surviving member trapped here at mercy of human stranger. No deal, replied voice dripping disdain mixed with barely controlled rage as figure emerged fully from concealment stepping confidently forward armed and armored for final assault. You'll pay dearly tonight. Thomas tensed instantly, rifle rising smoothly toward shoulder ready to meet incoming threat head-on yet also aware that time was running out fast for negotiations now shifting rapidly towards confrontation. He took a deep breath steadying himself mentally as assassin closed remaining distance quickly speeding up his own movements accordingly knowing every second counted until inevitable clash occurred. See it your way, Thomas conceded grimly leveling weapon directly at advancing target, who returned fire almost simultaneously, with twin bursts of automatic rounds ricocheting off bark surrounding position. He ducked sharply evading worse impacts, before returning steady stream of accurate shots, aimed precisely between visible gaps and protective armor plates each hit designed to incapacitate rather than kill, unless absolutely necessary. Not today, Liara growled fiercely, as she joined fray moving quickly along left flank with makeshift weapon swinging low and hard against legs causing attacker to stumble slightly but only momentarily losing precious seconds needed for Thomas to press advantage further. Her eyes blazed brightly beneath silver blue skin, illuminated starkly under harsh dawn light breaking through canopy above. They moved together now almost seamlessly, Thomas providing cover fire, while Liara pressed physical assault upon vulnerable points until finally managing to land decisive blow across jaw sending enemy sprawling awkwardly onto ground where he lay still momentarily stunned. But even in this weakened state, the assassin showed remarkable resilience rising quickly with surprising speed toward final showdown between them. You're done, Thomas snarled fiercely lunging forward into close combat exchanging rapid blows and parries amidst flurry of steel against body armor, until finally managing to land solid strike directly across collarbone, causing attacker's weapon arm to go limp instantly. He followed through, swiftly grabbing hold firmly before slamming fist upward, breaking jaw in devastating blow, leaving man groaning uselessly on forest floor. But then came surge of pain shooting sharply down Thomas' side, sharp sting turning quickly into dull ache spreading outward as he realized with cold certainty that something inside had just ruptured under stress of prolonged engagement. Blood welled up rapidly, staining fabric beneath armor, slick against skin, causing him to stagger. Sly, wide despite grim determination not to let this moment slip away. Liara was immediately at his side, pulling back tunic hastily, exposing wound, fingers probing expertly amidst growing crimson stain already spreading across abdomen and chest, their eyes widening sharply in realization of severity as Thomas struggled weakly against mounting tide of shock, clouding vision, threatening awareness. She knew if they didn't act fast, hold on, she ordered fiercely through clenched teeth while reaching for med kit from rucksack lying nearby, quickly assembling needed supplies despite urgent circumstances demanding quick action under duress. I need you alive, Thomas groaned quietly yet firmly, nodding once more into dusk deepening around them as forest shadows lengthened ominously, casting long dark fingers stretching outwards over clearing where fallen enemies lay still unmoving amidst gathering darkness. No other way, he rasped hoarsely, despite pain gripping him fiercely now that adrenaline rush had begun to subside, leaving raw agony sharp and unyielding. Just hold me. Liara's eyes burned brightly with fierce determination as she worked swiftly yet carefully, hands shaking slightly against growing pressure of blood loss threatening both their survival here amidst fading light, where only one outcome would suffice for continuation beyond this moment. Why? She asked quietly, even though it seemed pointless question under circumstances, more seeking some semblance of connection rather than actual answer to unspoken mystery. You don't know me. Thomas managed weak smile despite growing pain gripping him tightly, understanding shining clearly in eyes as he looked up at her standing there amidst gathering twilight, working tirelessly against odds stacked heavily against them. Didn't need to, Thomas explained simply yet deeply, voice low and steady, amidst rising tide of darkness threatening encroachment. You needed help. Simple. Liara nodded sharply once more, focusing entirely back upon task, before hands moving rapidly over wound, sealing torn tissue closed while applying pressure, staunching flow of blood, slowly bleeding strength from both figures left here together amidst final stand against unseen forces still pursuing beyond horizon. And then dawn broke fully into new day, casting stark contrasts across forest floor below where Thomas lay weakened but alive, eyes closing briefly against harsh light, penetrating veil of darkness receding, finally revealing truth behind actions taken tonight under moonlit sky. Stay with me, Yara urged fiercely through gritted teeth as she fought desperately to staunch bleeding while also supporting weight shifting increasingly toward reliance upon her strength alone amidst growing weakness gnawing steadily at core being. I won. Thomas opened eyes again, meeting her sharply, breath rasping shallowly now against mounting pain, but resolve unyielding despite circumstances threatening dissolution of willpower, holding body together long enough for necessary repair to occur. Counter offer, he whispered hoarsely yet clearly toward final remaining threat still lying incapacitated nearby, words resonating fiercely amidst gathering silence surrounding clearing where only sounds of nature persisted now as dawn light bathed forest in fresh new beginning. Leave us, now live. But then came surge of sound cutting sharply through peaceful moment, a sharp crackle splitting air, with unmistakable report signaling discharge of projectile traveling swiftly across gap between combatants. His final act sealing fate here, amidst fading twilight, where only survivors remained standing amidst carnage left behind. Agreed, replied hollow voice from shadowed figure rising once more toward final confrontation, despite injuries sustained previously now meeting. Thomas gazed sharply over Liara's shoulder. But not us. And then he fired one last shot, single round piercing thick bark of nearest tree, narrowly missing both figures, still standing amidst clearing yet leaving unmistakable mark signaling ultimate terms imposed here amidst gathering dawn, light casting shadows long and deep across forest floor below. Thomas groaned quietly despite renewed assault upon already weakened body pain, sharp and unyielding, now threatening to overwhelm consciousness altogether as darkness closed around vision, sharply cutting off sight entirely from world outside. Lying prone amidst underbrush where final confrontation ended, leaving survivors standing alone amidst rising sun casting stark contrasts over bloodied ground beneath feet. Liara held him tightly against mounting tide of shock clouding senses, eyes burning brightly despite growing pain, gripping body fiercely now that adrenaline rush had begun to subside, revealing raw agony sharp and unyielding. But she wouldn't let this moment slip away, not here amidst final stand taken together, where only one outcome sufficed for continuation beyond current darkness threatening encroachment. Come on, she urged fiercely, pulling Thomas back toward safety of forest interior, where sanctuary awaited amongst familiar surroundings, offering respite from relentless pursuit still closing rapidly despite temporary reprieve secured through sacrifice made tonight under moonlit sky. It'll get you to cabin. And so, amidst gathering dawn breaking fully into new day, casting stark contrasts across forest floor below, where survivors remained standing together amidst carnage left behind, Liara began dragging Thomas back toward haven offered by small wooden structure lying hidden amongst dense foliage nearby, offering sanctuary from unseen forces still pursuing beyond horizon, leaving only truth remaining clear amidst fading twilight, where final confrontation ended. She drags him back to the cabin. Now she's saving him. Liara gently eased Thomas onto a wooden bench inside her newly adopted shelter. The small cabin nestled amidst dense foliage on this remote colony world. Her hands moved deftly, tending to his wounds, as Shed learned during their harrowing journey here, under cover of nightfall. The fire crackled beside them, casting flickering shadows across worn walls and lending warmth against the chill that seeped through the wooden frame. Lie still, Liara instructed softly, her voice a mixture of command and concern. She applied herbal poultices to his most serious injury scars from old battles reopening under new stress. Her movements were meticulous, yet swift years spent in royal isolation had honed her precision and efficiency when caring for others. Thomas grunted at the pain, but remained still, eyes half closed, as he surveyed this peculiar guardian who'd come into his life unbidden and seemingly indelible. Thank you, he rasped out eventually, voice thick with exhaustion and gratitude. Liara nodded slightly in acknowledgement, her silver blue skin reflecting soft hues of light from dancing flames. She wiped a stray lock of sweat-dampened hair off Thomas' forehead before settling beside him on the bench for some rest herself, though she remained vigilant against any signs of worsening condition or sudden needs. Days passed within this sanctuary, each one marked by slow recuperation and tentative companionship under the watchful gaze of forest shadows shifting through leafy branches. The cabin had become a place not just to survive, but also to begin piecing together shattered lives. Liara's lost home world replaced by this secluded haven, Thomas' solitary refuge now shared with another soul. Morning sunlight filtered gently into the room as both began their routine, Liara tending to Thomas while he watched over her from his reclined position. On these quieter days, conversations emerged naturally between them, words exchanged more freely than in those initial moments of mutual survival dependence. They spoke about pasts left behind and futures uncertain. "Tell me," said Liara one day as she dabbed a healing balm onto a particularly deep cut on Thomas' forearm, "what was it like being part of your unit?" Thomas' eyes flickered, briefly closed at the mention, memories surfacing alongside physical wounds. "It was a way to protect," he started slowly after a moment's silence, "to serve something bigger than myself." "And now?" Liara prompted gently. "Now I'm hiding," Thomas admitted with quiet resignation. His gaze drifted towards an old photograph on the mantel, a faded image of his team, faces smiling even as their eyes held determination and resolve under harsh combat conditions. "But you're still here," noted Liara quietly, her own fingers tracing the scar where an assassin's blade had nearly ended her life. "Still fighting." "Fighting what now?" Thomas asked rhetorically, with a wry smile playing on his lips, despite lingering pain gnawing at muscles and bones alike. Liara sighed softly before responding earnestly, "I don't know if I can go back to my people. They're all gone." Thomas looked up sharply, meeting her gaze steadily across the distance separating them. "Then where do you want to go? What's next?" "I don't know," she confessed honestly, shoulders slumping slightly in a rare moment of vulnerability. He regarded her thoughtfully before speaking again with unexpected warmth. "Whatever you want, that's what freedom means." "Freedom?" Liara echoed slowly, reflecting on his words. "I've never been free." Thomas' expression softened as he met her eyes once more, seeing the fear and uncertainty lingering there despite the strength she'd shown in their shared struggles thus far. "I don't know how to be free either," Thomas admitted candidly after a pause, "but hiding behind this cabin has given me years of solitude off. Pretending freedom is just not being seen." Liara regarded him silently for long moments, absorbing his words as much as the sentiment conveyed in them. "Then maybe we can learn together," she suggested softly. The suggestion hung between them, a delicate balance, suspended by mutual understanding and respect built through shared hardship and survival. Thomas smiled, genuinely for perhaps the first time since Liara had arrived at an expression so rare it seemed almost out of place on his weathered face, but undeniably sincere. "Then stay," he said simply, reaching a hand towards her as if to emphasize his offer verbally could not convey alone. Liara's heart leapt at those three words spoken with such clear intention. She took his offered hand gently in hers, feeling the warmth transfer through their skin contact despite the layers of cloth between them, symbolizing something far deeper than mere physical connection or mutual trust, but a genuine bond forged amidst adversity and survival struggles. The veteran who once sought only isolation had found not just someone to share it with, but also a reason beyond self-preservation for continuing on. And in doing so, she discovered within the confines of this humble abode a place that felt truly like home. "Then stay," Thomas repeated softly again, as if ensuring their agreement was solidified somehow by repeating it aloud under rising dawn light streaming through cabin windows, now casting long shadows across room where only two souls remained after world outside continued its relentless march forward. Without them, yet bound closer together inside this sanctuary nonetheless.